everybody reads like the Big Purple book by Hormozy. They read your books, right? I'm even talking about really any industry, but let's just talk about the coaching space or the high ticket space. In the prospects mind, they kind of all look the same. They got these crazy guarantees, they got these crazy offers, and so the marketplace starts to see that, and they're like, "Oh, it's the same thing."
Yeah.
So your competitive advantage is how you frame the offer.
Yep.
It's not the offer itself, but it's how you frame it.
Mm-hmm.
I know everybody in here probably wants to know what that means. What does that mean, like in your mind? How do you frame the offer? Why is it so important framing it? Why do you have to do that?
We think about everything. I mean, the whole psychology of a funnel is framing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I look at, like if you read Persuasion, it's all about like the thing that happens before. Like a funnel, that's all it is. Like everything inside of a funnel it's a frame for the next thing. And I remember I learned this originally from Mark Joyner, was my first mentor back when I was in college. And I remember I was listening to these CDs that I bought from him way back in the day. And he talked about, he's like, do you think that all traffic is created equal? In my head, I was like, yeah, if someone just comes to your website, it's probably the same thing. And he's like, think about this. He's like, let's say there's two different ads, right? One ad is like, Russell Brunson's a scam artist. He stole all my money. I invested with him. It didn't work out. I lost my wife and kids because of it. Now I'm bankrupt. He sucks. Check out his new book here. Right? Sure. That person goes through. Versus someone's like, hey, Russell Brunson changed my life. Like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Like, because of that, I'm financially free and my wife, my kids love me. Click here, right? It's the only thing different between the page they land on is the same. It's the frame they enter the page is what's different, right?
So you're marketing to the identities of two different people is what you're doing. So that those are two different hooks, right?
Yeah.
So you're attracting that first one. We're like, oh, he's a scam artist. He's like this. You're attracting the identity of the person who wants to read about conspiracies. Who, not to say they're not all true,
but
or
they're
false,
less likely to buy.
Yeah, but they're less likely to buy. But that's going to hook them in, and somehow in that funnel, that period, you're building them into the identity of the person who becomes a buyer.
Yeah.
Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. And you think about like each step in the funnel is a new frame, right? So they click on the link. That's the first frame. They hit the page, and then you're trying to create an environment, and you're setting a frame very specific. So when they put in their email address, and they go to the next page, and that page is setting the frame for this. So every step in the funnel is the pre-frame for the next page and the next page. Even when the funnel finishes, right? That whole experience was a pre-frame for, we're on your team, phone call. My team is going to be one-to-many sell, right? We'll pre-frame the next step and the next step. And so they all kind of lead that way. Yeah. And so the same thing is true when you are positioning an offer, when you're just like, you can hear it, like I hear it in people in their ads and stuff like, this is better than all the other coaching programs out there. Our people get results faster. And it's like, you hear this ER phrase. Yeah. And I'm like, you're selling.
You sound like everybody else.
Yeah. Versus
we're the number one company in the world. Oh, you know what? I was going to say, how many salespeople come up to you and say, we're the 17th best in the market. You should, everybody says the same thing. So it's like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're pre-framing them for whatever you want to do. You're also doing a lot of deframing. Talk to us about deframe. Why is it important in your funnels to be able to take them out of beliefs they have that might hold them back? Yeah. Tony Robbins talks a lot about that.
Yeah. And, this is why I love webinars so much, because in webinars, I have a 90-minute window where I can do that. But there's two sides to this, right? Like sometimes I can consciously convince them to buy something, but if I do that, their likelihood of succeeding with it, if they don't subconsciously have the belief that they're going to be successful, they're not going to be, even if I convince them to buy, they're not going to be able to actually fulfill on it, right? And same thing is like for most people, it's going to be hard to convince them to buy if they've got subconscious beliefs that are against what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
And you think about our brains, like we have thoughts and we have feelings. And most of us think our thoughts would dictate where we're going, but it's not. It's our feelings. The feelings actually dictate it. So like when I tell someone like, hey, you can win a 2 Comma Club award, they're like, oh, that sounds amazing. But then they feel something like they feel sick to their stomach, they feel anxiety, they feel nerves, they feel like that's what actually is going to drive them one way or another, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm speaking to someone in a funnel, on an event, through podcasts, and I say something like that, again, there's gonna be some people who subconsciously believe that and they're like, yes, and they're ready to go. Yeah. The majority of people aren't. They've been programmed through the whole life with a different message. So even though they're like conscious, like that sounds amazing, they're gonna feel something different.
That sounds amazing, but I'm not sure it would work for me.
Yeah.
Inferior complex.
Yeah. And it could be that, it could be a lot of things. Like there's different reasons, right? There's some people just like their parents told them that people had money were bad. They watch, they watch a lot of TV, and you look at every superhero movie of all time, the billionaire is always the bad guy, right? They've heard that their entire life. So like in the head, like I want to make money, but then I'll be a bad guy. And like whatever the thing is, it's there. So what's cool is like when you have chance to present and you know ahead of time, it's like, hey, here's the false belief somebody has. Then you've got this window where it's like, okay, how do I tell a story that'll rewrite their false belief, right? Because if I can tell a story in a way that is emotionally engaging and more and like gets them to believe versus their story, then it'll trump the other one, right?
Yeah, that's called reality stacking in NLP. So this is important. I want everybody to listen to what he's just saying here. Okay, so he's talking about the identities of the people who go through your funnel. So raise your hand if you've got a funnel, you do marketing. I'm assuming most that's you, or you're in sales, entrepreneur. So we got here. So what he's talking about is you're shifting their belief systems. And this is something like, this is what we always talk about. Selling something you do to people or selling something you do for people. Well, in my mind, you're doing this for them, because if I can't, like Russell's saying, if you can't take them out of their limiting beliefs or their stories that have held them back from having what they want in their life, that means they don't buy. And when they don't buy, you're not really solving any of their problems. So what he's talking about here is taking them out of, these identities that they have, that the government, is bad, or whatever it is. These identities of, rich people are bad, or what's the money doesn't buy happiness, or whatever the saying is, or the love of all money, the root of evil is the love of all, whatever it is. So they have all these negative beliefs that prevent them from moving forward. So if you don't learn how to take them out of those identities and build them into the identity of the person who does buy, that's why the conversions are really low.
And also the second side is just then, because sometimes you're still good for selling, you'll get someone to buy, but then those are the ones who a week later refund, or 6 months later are angry because they never actually, the internal false belief was still there, right?
Yeah, because it was your idea. You pushed them into it instead of getting them into the identity of the person who's like, of course I want to do this.
Yeah. And when I started like learning this and actually applying it and
this
doing
is not something you're taught at BYU. So where did you learn this at?
I learned, I wish they taught that class. That'd be amazing.
Identity framing 101.
Yeah. I think it was, for me, like the way I learned this skill set is I would go, this is pre-Stark Market, pre-2008, right? There were a lot of events happening back then. And I started going to events. And I would usually get asked to speak, so I'd show up to the events. And the events back then were different. Well, I don't know. We'd go to an event and the promoter would be like, all right, there's going to be 500 people in the audience. And the way it works, obviously, it's speak to sell. So like, I got to fly my own stuff out there. I pay for my hotel, but I get to speak and sell. Yeah. And so I show up to these events, and 9 times out of 10, you show up and there's 30 people in the audience, and 15 of them are the other speakers. And so we're all getting up there. It's like, all right, someone's getting paid today and nobody else is. Like, one of us is going to win.
Wow.
And so I would sit in the back and I listen to every presenter and like try to say, what are they doing? Like, how do I beat this guy? Like, and so I'd watch the first person, and second and third. And so I was just taking notes on what they were doing, how they were doing it, right? And then I have my chance. And some days I would close the room and I'd get paid. Some days I'd blank and I have to go home by myself. But like, it was eat what you kill. And so that's how like I learned this.
So you kind of learned through trial and error.
So I started learning, and at first it was more like I was focused on the sales tactics versus later I started learning from really good storytellers and things like that. And like, that's where I started realizing that not only could I close the room, then people had success. Yeah. And I remember I had this weird moment. This guy came up to me. The guy had a great business, make a lot of money. And I think I had like 2 like solid success stories, people having success. And I remember he came to me, he's like, how'd you get those success stories? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I've never had one of my clients who've like come back with a success story. I was like,
that could be trouble.
Weird. Yeah, I remember definitely in trouble. I was just like, weird. And then, and I started thinking, I'm like, why am I not getting more? And I started thinking through, I'm like, it's because like I'm convincing them to buy, but I'm not changing them. Like, I got to change them in the sales process. And so that's when I started really focusing on that. And I look at, when we launched ClickFunnels, the presentations we did were so much like, it was, yes, I'm trying to convince them that they need, the funnels are the greatest in the world and everything else. But like the way we did the stories and stuff, it was more so like, how do I get these people out of their own way? Yeah. And it was crazy. And then more people would buy. So increase our conversions. Then people they actually did the thing afterwards. And that's when we started getting success stories rolling like crazy. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually working. Like, it's not only is this like, yes, it's a slick sales tactic to get more sales. It's like, but it actually helps them so they actually have success with it. And that's,
honestly, if they don't buy, you're not solving problems. If they leave the room, you didn't really, Tony Robbins talks a lot about this. I like to take it a step further, but in order to, if you really want to master, I talked about this in the last show, if you want to master persuasion and influence, like Russ was talking about, you have to master the art of emotionally connecting with that other human being, even if it's 1 to 1,000 or 1 to 10,000 or 1 to 1, where they feel like you understand them, their needs, their desires, their wants, even their fears, but you have to learn how to do that without buying into their story. They've already done that. That's why they don't have what they want. So if you buy into their limiting beliefs of, I don't have the money now. Oh, okay. Or, I need to think it over. It's not the right time for me. If you buy into their story and they don't buy, you offered them no value. You just wasted their time. Because obviously there's a reason why they showed up. They obviously know they have some type of problem. And this is why what Russell's talking about here is really, really critical for whatever you sell. Doesn't matter what you do. So you're talking about weaving in what we would call embedded commands, but doing it through a story. Because if you just told an audience like, hey, you need to step up, you suck.
Your story sucks.
You know, and you
This is a
say
better
that
one.
to an audience, what are they going to do? They're going to be like, I don't suck. What are you talking about? Especially somebody who has a superior complex, which is probably 20% of a room. So what he's saying is you have to learn stories of other people and then weave them back into them.
Yeah. And the goal of the story, who here has ever seen the movie Inception? Like I did a course back, they called Inception Secrets, and that's what it was. Because Inception's like, if you remember the movie, it's like if I go back and if we just tell you the dream, then you're gonna know it's a dream and whatever, right? It's like you have to go in there and you have to convince them that it's their idea. Yeah. And so when you do stories the right way, the mistake I see a lot of people do is like they're coming in and they're telling a story, and then like they're almost like telling the moral. So the moral of the story is you need to take action. And it's like you do that, like you told them the moral. Like the goal of the story is not to tell them, I call it an epiphany, it's not to tell them the epiphany. The goal is to tell a story that gets them to have the epiphany. Right? I'm placing this story inside your mind so that you have the aha of like, oh, I need this thing. And that's the art, right? That's what I think people miss a lot of times. Like, oh, I'm telling a story. And I told them like the punchline was this. I'm like, no, don't tell them the punchline. Like I'm telling you a story about what I experienced. And if you tell the story correctly, like you're trying to get somebody in the same emotional state that you were in when you experienced that, right? And so I'm telling a story, I'm like thinking back, like, what was I feeling? And you look at the good authors, like the best authors in the world are great. They'll be telling you a scene of a book, right? And in the book, they'll spend 20 pages describing the room and the scene and the heat and the light, how they felt in their stomach and their palms, their hands, and like they'll explain everything so you feel the same thing the character's feeling, and then they deliver the story, right? We do the same thing when we're telling stories. It's like you go back and you're telling the story, and you have to get someone in the same state that you were in when you had the breakthrough or the epiphany. And that's what story is powerful. Is that you can take somebody from their reality into the reality, because humans are empathetic, right? And so if I start telling you a story about this thing that happened to me, and my back hurt and my hand, if I tell it to you the right way, like you'll start, like your back will start hurting, you'll start feeling thirsty, your hands will start, like the same things I'm experiencing, you'll start experiencing, because we have empathy. And now it's like we rapport, and now I can tell you what I experienced, and all of a sudden like you'll experience the same thing, and then you have the epiphany. I'm not telling you about it, you have it, and that's when the shift happens. That's when the subconscious shift actually happens.